Welcome to That Business Show 2.0 with your host, Jamie Maloney, where business becomes show business. On today's program, we're going to be talking about why things catch on, why things go viral, why things become contagious. And all this inspired by a book I just recently read by Jonah Berger called Contagious. And so this is why things catch on. Jonah Berger is a marketing professor at Wharton University, and I've had him on my program before. And he is a thought leader and a tremendous researcher and professional on the idea of virality, or not necessarily the idea, but the concept of virality, why things go viral, why things are contagious, why do things catch on? And it's something that, you know, all of us are sometimes mystified by. Why is that stupid video getting millions and millions of views? Meanwhile, I put up something that is, worthwhile and informative, and, everybody should watch it, and I get 10 views. And so those are things that just don't make sense necessarily in our world. But Jonah took the time to research the different components of what makes things catch on, make things go viral. And he came up with 6 different things that need to be contained. Not necessarily all of them need to be a component of whatever it is that catches on, but they all at least have some of these components with them. And so I want to go through the different steps that are necessary to make something become contagious. Now, STEPPS is an acronym in this situation, and it's STEPPS, and you can easily remember these different ideas if you remember that acronym right there. And so let's talk about these different things that help something become contagious. The first thing that he talks about is for something to become contagious and to catch on, you must be able to mint social currency out of it. It must have something that makes people look good when they are talking about your product. And one thing I loved about this book is he shares countless stories and examples and things that a lot of people may recall, and I'll bring up a couple of them here throughout the discussion. But when he gives you an idea, he relates it to a situation that you will probably remember, and if you don't remember, something that you can definitely relate to. But STEPPS begins with social currency, and because when you give people a way to look good when talking about your product or service, you give them a reason to share and to carry it on. He uses, the story of also, well, first off, before I go into that, there are 3 different components of the minting social currency, and it breaks down to inner remarkability, the gamification, and also making people feel like they are insiders. And so those are the 3 different components of minting social currency. He tells a story in this first section of the book about a pair of brothers in New York City, and they have a hot dog bar, and they want to, or hot dog stand, and they want to open the bar. And so there are a lot of bars in New York City. How are they going to differentiate themselves? How are they going to stand out and grow a bar inside New York City? And so one day they're at an antique store and they see this old phone booth, and they decide to purchase the phone booth. And they were kind of hung up on this idea of just secrecy. And so inside of the hot dog bar, they decided, or hot dog stand, they made a room that you could only get through by going through this phone booth. And through the phone booth was a bar. And that bar was a secret called Please Don't Tell. And so it had no marketing, it had no advertising, and it only allowed like 45 to 50 people in the bar at any given time. And you had to make reservations because you couldn't get into it. But in the beginning, how do you get an idea like that to catch on? There was no marketing, there was no advertising. But the idea of secrecy and making people, feel like they were an insider by knowing about it really allowed it to catch on. Today, it's a highly sought after bar in New York City, and this has all just been in the last few years. And you have to get to it by going into their hot dog stand and then going through a secret phone booth passage into a bar called Please Don't Tell. And then at the end of your service, they say, please don't tell, but maybe one other person. And they give you a card with the contact information for the bar. But opened in 2007, and today it remains very difficult to get a reservation. And so, the idea of secrecy really helps to, show how minting social currency can help grow your business, your product, or your service, because now you're showing people that you're giving people that sense of being an insider. There's also a degree of inner remarkability in that you know about this bar that nobody else knows about. It has this phone booth entrance, and so it really is a niche type of an environment. And so that's how they are able to help their grow their bar off of their hot dog stand. One of the things that they had always wanted to do. Another story that he uses to demonstrate the idea of minting social currency is the story of Blendtec, a blender company, founded in 1999 by an engineer. Somebody who was a great designer, but really not a great marketer, and struggled to get, a blender to, catch on. I mean, nobody really likes to talk about blenders. I mean, it's not an exciting thing. And why are you going to share a video on a blender or talk to your friends about this great blender? So he had problems competing with the other blenders, but he had such a great product that he knew that if he could just market it right, that it would catch on. So in 2006, he hired a marketing director who on the first day of his job noticed a bunch of sawdust on the back room of the floor, and he saw the founder of the company back there grinding up pieces of 2x4s and a variety of different things, and the blender was just annihilating everything that was put into it. And so the marketing director saw an opportunity. He thought, wow, this blender really is the toughest blender on the marketplace, but we need to show it to people the way that I am seeing it right now. And so what they did on a $50 budget, that's all that he was given to, not $500, not $50,000. The guy was given a $50 budget. And so he designed a video that showed this blender demolishing anything and everything. A bunch of marbles, like 50 marbles in this blender, wood chips, CD drives. The blender could handle nearly, I guess, anything. And the video went viral and got over 6 million views and made Blendtec a household name in the blender business because it was just destroying everything and it was put into this blender. And so the virality was, came about because it minted social currency. It gave people a reason to talk about this and show people that, wow, this is something that people can use. And so again, Blendtec coming about because of, the idea of using the blender to destroy something other than what it was really meant to do, which is just blending up milkshakes and other food products. And again, the 3 ways to break or to generate social currency and generate or revolve around inner remarkability. That's what makes something interesting, surprising, or novel. That is breaking a pattern that people expect. He uses the story of Snapple inside of the book, and we all remember and still do. You open up the can or the glass of Snapple. Underneath the lid is a little quote. There is something or whatever. I remember one of them from my favorite movie, Old School. You're My Boy, Blue. I got a Snapple one time, and that was underneath the cap. It was "You're My Boy, Blue." And if you haven't seen the movie, Blue is a character that dies, unfortunately, in the movie, although it is a comedy. So his death is kind of funny about how it comes about, but I won't go into that on this discussion. But I remember, it gave me a reason to talk about Snapple, gave me a reason to show my friends, and all along I am helping to carry the message of Snapple to other people. You see, you can only do so much advertising and so much marketing, but for things to catch on, you've got to get people to talk about them. You got to get people to share them. And so that's the idea of what is Contagious and why things catch on inside of this book by Jonah Berger. Highly recommended. You can pick it up at jonahberger.com. Also, talking about the inner remarkability component of minting social currency, that first in a series of 6 different steps to help things catch on. He talks about, the low-cost airline JetBlue, how people didn't believe that they could get such value for such a low cost when JetBlue came onto the marketplace, that it made people talk about it and share it with more and more of their friends. And so the idea of inner remarkability was demonstrated in the book by the story of JetBlue. And then game mechanics, which is a component of the social currency part, has to do with things like frequent flyer miles, how people perform in relation to others. He uses a story that's kind of interesting in the book where people were polled and said, would you rather make $50,000 a year inside a company where everybody else was making $100,000 a year, or would you rather make would you rather make $50,000 a year inside a company when everybody else was making $25,000 a year, or $100,000 a year when everybody else was making $200,000 a year. People took the $50,000 one because they were making more than the people around them. I may have gotten that out of line in saying that, but what I'm saying is people are looking more so at how they relate to others. So they would take a lower paying job if they were making more than others versus a higher paying job where they were, making less than others. So people perform better when they view themselves in relations to others, and that's a component of game mechanics, another component of social currency that is found inside of the Contagious book, and ultimately making people feel like insiders. When they feel like insiders, they want to talk about it and they want to share with other people. Just like in this first story about Please Don't Tell, the bar inside of the restaurant that got people talking about it with no marketing and no advertising, made people feel like insiders. And so that is just the first in a series of 6 different steps, and I'll cover the other 5 steps when we come back from the break. The social currency part of the book is the kind of the longest. It has the 3 different components of it, but the other components of what allows things to catch on also are demonstrated in the rest of the books through STEPPS, which are triggers, emotions, public, practical value, and stories. And we'll talk about that when we come back from the break. But in the meantime, you can pick up a copy of this book, Contagious, over at jonahberger.com. And he's also got a number of resources to help you analyze your own product or service to see if it meets these different components to help something catch on. So visit jonahberger.com for more information, and more information about this program at thatbusinessnetwork.com. You're listening to That Business Show 2.0 with your host, Jamie Maloney, where business becomes show business. Welcome back to That Business Show 2.0 with your host, Jamie Maloney, where business becomes show business. We're talking about why things catch on today. Why do things become viral and other things do not? And it was inspired by the book Contagious, Why Things Catch On by Jonah Berger. And the next in this series is triggers. And we talked about this acronym STEPPS. That's how you can remember these, STEPPS. And so for something to catch on, for something to be viral, you must first mint social currency. And then from there, you must have a trigger. There must be things that are natural in the environment that when that happens, it makes people think of your product. And that's how most products are successful and catch on. Uses the story of a Mars bar in 1997 when the Pathfinder mission made a successful landing on Mars. That Mars bar, unrelated to the mission, saw an uptick in sales because that was acting as a trigger to make people think of the Mars bar. He also talks about the video Friday by Rebecca Black, a very annoying video that hit about 7 years ago, but was nonetheless very catchy and really caught on. But if you look at the chart of the activity and the downloads, it spiked every Friday because Friday itself was a trigger to make people think about the song. And so triggers are very important. Relate your product or service to something naturally occurring in the environment that makes people think of your product or your service, and it can help it go viral. He used an example of getting people to eat more vegetables, and he polled 2 different groups. The first group was given the slogan, live the healthy way, eat 5 fruits and vegetables a day. Everybody preferred that slogan to the other one, which was each and every dining hall tray needs 5 fruits and veggies a day. And everybody else thought that was dumb and kooky, but nonetheless, the people that were given the second slogan actually ate more fruits and vegetables because the dining hall tray acted as a trigger, and they ate 25% more fruits and vegetables. And so he does a lot of different studies and a lot of different research inside this book, and I'm just pulling select stories and examples to share with you, but there are countless examples inside of this book, such as that really make you think and show you how you can relate this to your own product or service. He also talks about voting locations and how voting locations influence behavior. For instance, you have voting at a school or a church, but if there's something on the ballot related to education, the educational piece will pass at a much higher rate or get more votes if they are polled inside of a school versus inside of a church. And so a lot of example about how triggers really influence people, and it's a very important component of getting your brand to catch on. So think about what it is that you're doing, think about your marketing and how you can relate it to natural triggers that are occurring every day in the environment. Another great example, he used the Geico caveman example. Geico caveman was a catchy little ad, but ultimately it was considered a failure because there's not a lot of cavemen in our environment, and so people aren't going to be thinking about insurance because they aren't seeing caveman. Versus the Budweiser "What's Up" commercial, where everybody's always saying "What's up" to one another, making them think about buying Budweiser. And so a great example that he uses in that chapter about triggers. Next component of why things catch on: emotion. When we care, we share. Everybody remembers the Susan Boyle story. If you haven't seen that video, go on the YouTube and check that out, where she performs for the Britain's version of America's Got Talent, where she comes out, middle-aged woman, poorly dressed, kind of scruffy looking, said she wanted to be like Elaine Page. Nobody believed she could sing, and then she busted out Les Miserables, a great rendition, and that video has gotten like hundreds of millions of views and launched her singing career. But that was because that really tugged at our emotions and caused that video to go viral. So make something emotional, and when people care, they share. He also shared the story of United Airlines, Sons of Maxwell in 2009, a fairly unknown band, gaining some popularity nowadays, but their luggage, which contained guitars, was being mishandled by baggage handlers, and they could see out the window them throwing the guitars, and they tried to complain to the flight attendants and management, and they kept getting blown off. No, don't worry about it, we can't do anything for you. Even after the airline, the flight ended and he found his guitar destroyed because of how it was handled, upper management still did not do anything for him. So he wrote a song called United Breaks Guitars, and the video went viral. Ended up causing United Airlines stock price to drop by 10% when that hit, and caused the CEO to actually have to make a statement on the situation. But when people care, they share. A lot of people identified with that story about how baggage handlers handle a luggage and how they are felt they are not being taken care of. Next component of why things catch on is public. Something is built to grow, it's built to show. It's got to be in the public's eye. If something is not in the public's eye, it's not likely to be shared because it can't be seen. And he uses the example of a drinking campaign in the University of Arizona, where a social worker was trying to reduce the binge drinking on campus. And she talked to the different people, and she found out that a lot of people were against binge drinking, but they did that because the simple fact that behavior is public and thoughts are private. And so if she thought if she could get, the education component alone wasn't working. She had to get people talking about this and sharing it with other people. And through her campaign, she was able to get people talking and sharing with other people. And that way people could relate to themselves, to other people, and see that they weren't alone. So again, it shows the idea of that behavior is public and thoughts are private. An excellent example about how if something is public, it can catch on and it can grow. He also talks about the I voted stickers in this chapter, how getting people to vote is a difficult thing. And when somebody goes to vote, you don't know if they voted, you don't know if they voted for, that's irrelevant. But in the 80s, they created the I voted stickers that you get at the polling booths. And so they made the voting public. It showed that people had went out to do it, so other people caught on and went and voted. The next component of STEPPS is practical value, and it needs to have the news that you can use. And he used an example of a video that went viral related to corn shucking. An 80-some-year-old man who had worked on farms his entire life showed how to get the corn silk off of the corn stalks. Everybody knows when you shuck a corn, it's got all those little silk pieces on that you can't get off. And one day he was making dinner with some friends and family, and they're shucking the corn, and he said, "Here, let me show you this." Took one of the corns, took off the leaves, put it inside the microwaved it like for 30 seconds or whatever. And then from that, the silk all just came right off, not even one piece remaining. And so the family was like mesmerized by this, and they put it on YouTube, and that video got 5 million views. The guy had never made a video in his life, and it did because it offered practical value. It was something that people could use. The final component of STEPPS is stories. Stories carry your message across multiple channels, and he uses the example of the Trojan horse. I think a lot of people are familiar with the story, or they've seen the movie Troy, where the Greeks, invade Troy by entering through the Trojan horse that is set outside of the walls of Troy that are impenetrable, and so the Trojan horse gets in and then destroys the city of Troy. But you need to develop your own Trojan horse. Where is it that you can park your story or your product or service inside a story that when people share the story, they're also sharing your product or your service? He also talks about Jared from Subway. Of course, now we know what happened with Jared. He's unfortunately, is in prison now for his actions. But before all that happened, the marketing around that campaign was very successful because people shared the story of Jared's weight loss, and which was something of emotion, but it's also something, that really related to people. And by that story carrying from person to person, they're also carrying the message of Subway, and that Subway was a healthy alternative to help you lose weight. And so all of these different components are why things catch on. You may have one and not the other. You may have 3 or parts and not 6 of the parts. There's no definite way why things ever go viral or don't go viral. But the ones that go viral all seem to have these different components inside of it. And Jonah Berger has done, a lot of research and a lot of study on why this stuff happens. And again, it comes down to social currency, triggers, emotion, public, practical value, and stories. If you go to his website at jonahberger.com, he also offers a number of resources that you can download to look at your own business to see why it may or may not be might not be catching on, and a lot of different questions you can ask yourself, and we'll post links to that up in the show notes as well. But some great stories, and I'm an academic at heart. I love to see the research that goes on behind what happens in business. And marketing is a funny thing. It's one of those things that you don't fully understand why some things succeed and some things fail. We will never be able to 100% answer that product will succeed or that service will succeed or whether it will fail or not. But if you're developing a product or a service, begin to think about these steps. Does your product mint social currency? Does it find a way to make people look good when they are talking about your product or your service? Are you helping them make them feel like insiders? Are you using game mechanics? Or are you making them feel inner remarkable? Those are the 3 components of the social currency chapter. Again, inner remarkability, game mechanics, and make people feel like insiders. Those are all the different components of minting social currency. Triggers are a huge component of whether you're making something go viral. You want to look for things that occur naturally in the environment, that when people see or experience them, they think of your product or your service. So think of triggers as a way to help grow your product or your service. Emotion, when people care, they share. Just like the Susan Boyle story made people realize that anybody could become what they want if they just got the opportunity and they just tried. So make sure your product invokes emotion. Make sure that your product is public. If it's private, it's not going to be shareable. If it's public, it's going to be in front of people, and it's going to be more likely to catch on. Just like the campaign against binge drinking, where everybody was against binge drinking, but because it was inside people's heads, it was private, it wasn't public. Practical value and stories. Those are the last components of STEPPS, STEPPS. Remember that to help your product or your service go viral. And pick up a copy of the book, Contagious, over at jonahberger.com. He's been on my program before, an academic, and I highly recommend the book. Catch new episodes of this program each weekday morning at 9 a.m. on thatbusinessnetwork.com, and connect with us all across social media. And please subscribe on iTunes. It helps the show grow and gain more support and get our message out to more and more entrepreneurs and professionals. You've been listening to That Business Show 2.0 with your host, Jamie Maloney, where business becomes show business.